So hey, what's up? This is Lenski here, and I'm going to do something a little different for this video. I know I haven't posted in a while, but rather than go through the whole spiel of editing together like trailer clips and pictures and things of Deathly Hallows, I'm just going to give a straight up kind of really short review about what I thought of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. You know, it's just easier to do, and I'm gonna see how it goes, and it's nice just to get my opinion out there, and I don't have to put a whole lot of work into it. I just saw the movie today, 10 o'clock showing. I usually don't have time to see the midnight screenings of movies. The last one I think I saw at midnight was, I think, Indiana Jones, like 3 years ago. So anyway, my opinion on Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, I'm going to try not to give too many spoilers, but if I do, I'll just put up a spoiler alert right on the screen. It's pretty much, it was good, it was really good. Probably not the best one, but it was probably up there. My favorite Harry Potter book and film of all time was Goblet of Fire. Just a lot of energy, and that was, Goblet of Fire was the first book that really was, you know, it felt more like a kid's book. It was like a novel. It was like 850 pages, and it was really thick, and it was so goofy. The first time I saw the Goblet of Fire book, I didn't even really think that was the real book, because it was, you put it next to the first 3 books in the series, and it was just so thick. And that's really where the actual story of Harry Potter began. And given that that was such a long novel, and they obviously had to trim so much out of that book, I thought they did such a great job with that film. It was probably still the most exciting film, and a lot of the supporting characters in that movie they finally brought to light. Like, there are a lot of supporting characters in the earlier books that we really didn't get to see a lot of. Who comes to mind right away, of course, are the Weasley twins, Fred and George Weasley. Phenomenal job in that film. Mad-Eye Moody, all those actors brought a lot to the table, and to this day I still think Goblet of Fire, and that was the only Harry Potter film I saw in IMAX. So, and I loved all the Harry Potter movies, with the exception of Order of the Phoenix. I thought was probably the weakest one, but I'll get into that a little further down in the review. So, Deathly Hallows Part 2 was good. It was kind of like, the best way I can kind of sum up the whole experience of the 2-part Harry Potter movie, Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, it's kind of like Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2, where Kill Bill Volume 1 was really it was more about the story and setting up the characters, and Kill Bill 2 was really more of an action movie. It didn't really have too much of a plot, but more action, at least in my opinion. It was just a different movie, even though it was continuing the same story. And that's kind of how I felt about Deathly Hallows. At this point, I think the first one was probably done better. I just thought it was more emotional and it told a better story. It was more suspenseful. This one was very intense, but it was still just a heavy action film. It really reminded me of like the Lord of the Rings, like especially at the end of the movie where they're all at Hogwarts and they're fighting off the Death Eaters and Voldemort comes. They built it up, you know, they have a lot of that slow motion where there's so many things going on, and then Harry has to confront Voldemort and they have that final confrontation. The build-up is just like Peter Jackson and the Lord of the Rings, the way he handled it, where you have like one shot of like Aragorn and the troll, and then you have Frodo fighting off Gollum in the cave. The same setup was kind of how Deathly Hallows Part 2 kind of unravels itself. There's not a lot I can really say. The best way I can, because my feeling for pretty much all the Harry Potter movies, it's kind of a pro and a con, is that for the most part, with the exception of maybe The Prisoner of Azkaban, they all pretty much follow the book scene for scene. I mean, they don't really do a lot to surprise the audience, which I appreciate, but at the same time, it's like, you know, if you find fault with any of the books, those tend to carry over with the movies, and that was my biggest problem with, like, Order of the Phoenix. To me, it was a very dry read. It didn't really do anything. It didn't add anything to the story. It felt more like a filler novel. There's nothing in that book, I felt, that added to the mythology. You could have gone from Goblet of Fire to Half-Blood Prince and not really missed anything. The only thing we learned in Order of the Phoenix was that there's a prophecy about Harry and Voldemort. And you know, to me it was just such a filler book, and that was the longest book in the series and the shortest film. And Order of the Phoenix also, same with the Deathly Hallows, it's very gloomy, and I know as the books, what I appreciate about the series is as the books go on, J.K. Rowling treats the characters like real characters. So we see them grow, and of course the books do get darker and darker as they should, but I felt with Deathly Hallows it was necessary because there's so much at stake. With Order of the Phoenix, I just felt after Goblet of Fire, because Goblet of Fire I felt blended both the humor, the fantasy, the excitement, and the darkness very well. Order of the Phoenix, I just felt there wasn't any Quidditch that I recall. You know, all the typical stuff we've loved about the films up until that point they took out of it, and it was a very gloomy film. It was that was the movie where Harry, everybody was ignoring him, and everybody hated him, and Harry hated everybody, and it was just very sadistic. You had the stuff with Miss Umbridge, and all of that stuff. It was just a very dark and gloomy experience, both the book and the film. So that was the one film that, it was good, I just find the most fault with, and it was definitely my least favorite of the series. And I know a lot of people like that one the best, and that's fine. I just didn't really feel that it added too much to the story. I feel that was the one that wasn't really necessary. It didn't, to me, add a lot to the series. So anyway, with Deathly Hallows, it was a really good movie. It was exciting, and there were some parts where I really wanted to like get up out of my seat and cheer. Because with Deathly Hallows Part 1, because it was the first part of this two-part story, there were a lot of characters that we'd seen in the other movies that weren't in that one, like Miss McGonagall, Maggie Smith. I don't remember being in Deathly Hallows Part 1, so I was kind of missing her that whole film. So to see her in this film and the way they bring her back and reunite her with Harry and Hermione and Ron was really exciting. I mean, that was probably the highlight of the movie right there. And that was kind of where the movie, I don't want to say went downhill. I think the biggest thing with Deathly Hallows Part 2 was, this was the one, I remember reading that book and going, oh, this will be so good in a movie, this will be so cool in a movie, and you know, I can't wait till they make that movie. And I'm sitting there in the theater watching it unravel, going like, I know Miss Weasley is going to say that line, she has to, and everyone who's read the book knows what line I'm talking about. It's the one line, it's the best line in the whole series, and it's like, to me, when it happened, I was like, oh, well, she said it, you know, and that's what I felt a lot of it. You know, I was going like, wow, this is gonna, I wonder how they're gonna do this in the movie and make it all cinematic, and then it happens, and you're like, oh, well, they did it. I remember that from the book, but it happens exactly the way in the book. And don't get me wrong, I read the book one time when it first came out, like 3-4 years ago. So I'm watching the movie going, I don't remember that, I don't remember that, but the stuff that I do remember, most of it being towards the end of Part 2, was just like, nah. And I really did feel Deathly Hallows is a good book, and it puts closure on the series. She didn't leave it open for a possible 8th book or whatever. But I just felt that there was so much build-up to this last book, and we get there, and it's pretty anticlimactic. I won't say expected, because it's pretty cool, but it was kind of anticlimactic. And I won't give anything else away. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. It happens pretty much and this might be a spoiler just by saying this, it happens exactly the way that it happens in the book. So that being said, you know, everything up till the last like 3-4 pages of the book, that's even included, and they did that pretty well, but there's still a feeling of, God, if only they would have extended, like Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. To me, that's one of my favorite fantasy films. And a lot of people tend to hate the fact that that movie had so many endings. I loved it because I just thought that was such a perfect... Yes, it did go on for a while, but it's not just ending that movie. It's ending this whole big trilogy where you feel like you've been part of this huge adventure, and I felt that was so rewarding. I felt Deathly Hallows really should have had something like that. And it just kind of ends. You know, and after 10 years of doing these movies and watching these characters grow and really loving these characters, I just felt J.K. Rowling owed it to the audience to give us just more than that. And it ended well. It's what you would expect, but maybe that's the problem. It was what we expected. And it's hard to kind of have this huge ending that's satisfying to everybody. And I'm sure J.K. Rowling was under a lot of pressure to come up with an ending that was worthy of 7 books, 8 films, but it left me with kind of like, oh, well, you know, that's cool, it's over.